I'm gonna call our meeting to order here tonight. There's lots of delicious food out there from the Sala Alache, so help yourself. Have it. Feel free to wander out, get some food, or take some on your way out as well. And let's do just a check to see if Sophie can hear us and we can hear Sophie.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Sophie.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you just barely. Let me see if we can this a little louder.
I can hear you well.
Hear you right when we're right here, but
It's okay. I'm not going to talk.
okay, but you can hear us.
Yes.
Good to know. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here at the Ward 1 NPA. I'm going to try to fill Tom's shoes tonight, but stumbling along the way. So thanks for being here. We actually have a pretty spacious agenda where we really get to spend some time with the hardworking folks who are representing us. School board and city council and in the legislature. So thank you for that. And we start usually here by doing introductions. The mic is not going to really amplify you, but it's important for our coverage of the event. So there are some wireless mics distributed around, and we're going to start by asking folks just to introduce themselves. If you can say your name, your street, and any brief announcements that you want to make. And then we'll also have a speak out portion. So if you have kind of more of a passionate opinion about something, that would be the time. Looking at you, Sharon, just told me you had one. That would be the time to unleash that. But if it's more of a general announcement, please share as you do your introductions. So I will just say I'm Selena Holburn and I live over on Latham Court and I'm super happy to be here. I'll pass to Sharon. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Sharon Busher and I live on East Avenue.
Good evening. My name is Frederick. I live on Burlington Court and I am one of the 2 state representatives for this district.
I'm Catherine Block and I live upstairs in the meeting house.
Nice.
I'm Rob Dustin and I live on North Williams Street.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Chapel Sokol. I live on North Prospect Street. I'm a member of the board on the steering committee. And is this the time that I should do an announcement?
Sure, I think so.
So I'm going to stand up for this. I'm sure you all know.
Oh, thank you.
That our East District City Councilor was elevated to Superior Court Judge just a few weeks ago, I guess, or a couple weeks ago, and will be appointed in January, I assume by the Senate or something like that. So we're process. Very grateful for the service that that Tim gave to the ward, the district. And I'm not going to wax poetic. I could, but I'm not going to wax poetic. But you know, one Doherty loss, maybe another Doherty gain, in the sense that Sam Doherty has graciously allowed himself to be nominated by me to join the steering committee. So I'd like to nominate Sam to join the Ward 1 steering committee. If that's okay. And if second. And I guess
All right, we have a second. So do a quick all in favor.
you want to just introduce yourself and
Oh,
then
yeah.
Hi, I'm Sam Doherty. I am 16. I'm a junior at Burlington High School down in the mall. My dad is Tim Doherty, former East District City Councilor. You know, I started coming to these meetings with him to keep the company, to spend time with him, but it evolved into me really enjoying, you know, not spending time in meetings. I really get a sense of community. I learn what's going on in my neighborhood and in my city. And so I'm super happy to be able to help Jonathan and the other steering committee members out.
Nice.
All
All in favor?
Well.
Is that what it is?
Other.
Okay.
Anybody else want?
Oh, any other comments?
Yeah.
This, by the way, is because we don't have a maximum of 7, we can replace any, we can fill any seats, just start filling a seat like this.
I want to make a comment. Can I make a comment before we vote?
Yeah.
I just,
Yeah.
thank you. I just think it's, well, first of all, thank you for volunteering, but it's really important to get a continuum of ages and as part of the steering committee, because you may know things that are happening from your life experiences that would be meaningful for all of us to know, just like hopefully you'll gain from our experiences also. So I'm really happy that you wanted to do this, and I think we'll all benefit, so thank you.
All right, are we ready for a vote? All those in favor? Nice, unanimous election. We're gonna call that. Congratulations and thank you.
There's 2 microphones on that chair that show you what. Spread them around.
Up next, I'm Carol Livingston, I'm on Florida Court. I'm also a member of the steering committee. If you haven't had a chance to sign in, if you could do that, that would be great. Thank you.
I'm Tom Marathon, live on Nash Place, also part of the steering committee.
Prospect Street.
Gary Golden, Clarko Court.
Do this kind of inner row of Peter and Cheryl and Martin's Lisa.
Okay, Peter Lukowski, Burlington Co-housing on East Avenue.
Cheryl Green, also East Avenue, from Burlington Co-housing, and just wanted to say, a number of us were just at the V-Trans open house down on the waterfront. And it was very exciting to see these are the plans being developed for the new Sea Bridge, which, oh my goodness, we're being able to be walked across in 2028. But anyway, V-Trans on their website. You can see it all there, and there's a survey, and I would recommend it if you heard that.
Lisa Lax, I live on Tebow Parkway.
And I'm Reverend Mark Hughes, I live on Riverside.
What if we go to Sam and do the back row?
Yeah, I'm Sam Doherty, I live on Corner Square.
I'm Angie Jones, local and live on North Prospect Street.
I'm Ally Schachter, I live on North William Street. Catherine Vermeer, Ward Street.
Cyril Flash off of East Avenue at Co-housing. Richard Muir, of course. Early easier, Riverside Ave and what was it now?
Kathleen Donahue, 100th Street.
Oh, you hold on to that and then we'll just have a few distributed throughout. Thank you so much. Is there anybody we missed? Did we get you, Kathy and Gary? Charlie and Anna, Anna, right? Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Quick draw.
Hi, I'm Charlie G. I work for Town Meeting Television, and I'm running again.
Thank you both. And Gary, do you want to offer a little bit of a brief school board update?
Sure, I'll try to keep it quick.
Thanks so much.
Oh, you want to do Sophie?
Sophie,
J Street and Old East End Neighborhood Coalition.
thank you.
Hi, Gary Golden. I'm the East District School Commissioner. Public service announcement. We do have an open spot on the school board for either East District or Ward 1. I'm sort of willing to do either if I can find somebody, we can find somebody to take one of the spots. The petition has to be in January 31st. That's the deadline for it. And if you're at all interested, please let me know. I can fill you in. Compared to city council, it is a breeze. We, even with the finance committee meeting last night, we met for 3.5 hours, only meeting this month, which is not really good, but that is kind of what that's about. So please consider serving that way if you would like. We are in a really weird time with the state as far as trying to plan a budget. We did receive a letter, the most politicized December 1st letter aboard we've gotten since I've been involved in really pushing Governor Scott's agenda, where usually it's a fairly neutral, these are the numbers, this is what the range you could expect the number to fall into. The number was what could school districts plan for per student cost. We are very fortunate, and a lot of it through the lobby efforts that we've, as a board, have participated in. Weighted pupil really does help us immensely on our budget. If we were not looking at weighted students, we'd be looking about a $19,000 cost per student. We're actually looking in the $14,000 range. So it really is keeping our costs down. The educational fund numbers, which is a combination of our residential taxes, some business taxes, the lottery, Ways and Means. I think there's a Ways and Means tax that's earmarked for it. Is healthier this year than it was last year, despite it being sort of I'm sorry, Troy, I'm going to summarize that. It's sort of the piggy bank for some worthy causes, like free lunch for all students. Whether that's sustainable or not, I think is probably the legislature is going to have to reevaluate this year. So the numbers look like I'm supposed to kind of keep this on the down low, so don't tell anybody. That our actual in control tax rate may be almost negative as far as our spending locally for our actual teacher, staff, benefits, supplies, transportation. We're looking at least 500,000 so far in reductions. We have a couple of leases that will run out next year because of construction relocation. So we're renting from St. Mark's Catholic Church for part of IAA. We're renting the old Sarah Holbrook facility for the younger students. Those go away. The next year, we'll see amazing rental costs go away. Macy's will go away the next budget. The tech center rentals in South Burlington will go away. The hangar at the airport will be finished. Thank you, Senator Leahy, as a going away president, $10 million toward that facility. That will help immensely. The next year, God knows what the next year budget will be like. So I don't want to rehash. If you want to hear my gloom and doom about what could happen, look at last month's NPA. I don't want to do that to you. 2 months in a row. Changes are coming, and many of them not our control. The other side, CLA looks like we're going to be down around 80%. So I'm going to say CLA. I should remember help me. Common level of appraisal. Right. Yeah. So basically, that's the instrument that the state uses. We're not the only state that does this. That computes the difference between our tax rate and what our housing is actually selling for. We're still in a seller's market. So the few houses that are moving at pretty high, much higher rates. We're still affected by that. The good news is several of the larger towns have finally done their reappraisal, like Stowe. So that actually helps at the state level to have a more accurate statewide common level appraisal. We're only 3 years out from ours. That we've already, 20% out is just craziness. But it still will affect us not as much because of the difference between the state average and our average. But we also don't have that firm number yet either. So that's one of two numbers that are floating out. I don't have a figure yet. I don't know why they didn't give us last night for the bond servicing for the high school. So that will get added on. It won't be as high as last year. From here out, it's going to level out somewhat. I will get that number out to you as soon as that one is firm as well. So that's it. We just moved 2 interim principals to permanent principals at the high school. Sabrina's great and moved there and had to step in about this time last year to fill in for a rather tragic situation with that new principal. And then John Oliver at Emmons Middle School has been made permanent. So bless their hearts. I could never even imagine being a principal. So even though I've worked with a bunch. So that's any questions real quick. I want to keep my part to no gloom and doom and shorter tonight. Yes, ma'am. Hi, Sharon. It's looking around 79 to 81% is the range we've been given.
So, because I believe if you drop below 80%, it triggers a reappraisal.
It could, but there are no.
And I do know that the city council and the city, after the last shock for all of us, made the determination that the intervals between reappraisals had to be shortened. It can't be 10 years or whatever because of the fluctuation in the cost of housing. But that's why I wanted to know the number.
Yes.
Because I want to know if that's going to trigger a reappraisal for us, mandated versus our choice of changing the cycle.
That will be a harder issue to look into because that's totally out of our control. I will say practically there are no penalties, I believe, to a town for allowing that lapse to occur. Stowe was down to 68% CLA a year ago, and yet raised all bloody hell about the costs that were coming to them because they have very low weighted pupil adjustments. I should talk about that real quick. So weighted pupil came out of Act 127 a couple of years ago. And basically the state, and this comes out of an old, not old, 1990s legal decision, Brigham first et al. Versus state of Vermont, where three poor towns, 3 different lawsuits sued the state because their students suffered for not having either Vermont Yankee or IBM in their backyard paying down their taxes and the Supreme Court agreed with them that all Vermont students should have equal access to adequate student funding educationally. If you hear anyone griping about how complex Vermont school funding is, Brigham versus state of Vermont. That's it in a nutshell. Plus every other effort, foundation, taxes, which has made a new appearance, which 38 states use for their funding, is going to reoccur. I have floated that Burlington may need to be a sue based on Brigham if they try to do away with weighted people. So you're financially, your student rate is based on a flat rate. And then if you have students on IEP, if you have students in poverty, or you have students that are English language learners, that amount is adjusted. So we're pretty close to being funded 2 times the base rate because of our numbers of all 3 of those. So that's a question for Troy and his group, Troy and Brian, is that going to be revisited? They don't know. You don't know this. may be revisited this year. Certainly, we were in the office today, and the Lamoille South superintendent is back doing editorials wherever he can. To transparency is going to be the new word you hear, and what the claim is that weighted student is not transparent. It's quite the opposite. But that's the new code word that Governor Scott has floated and that has been picked up by allies. So it's very transparent. The numbers are there. We give the numbers, the state bumps back our number to make sure it's right. You know, it's
Wasn't transparent was how we did it before.
Yes.
The 90s on, it was so untransparent that it wasn't funny. And so this is more transparent, but many of these cities or towns that didn't come out gaining are upset because they beforehand had help from people in the legislature that brought home the bacon for them, and that isn't how it should be. It should be very open, apparent, and equal. And this is, it got, when they did this study, it was lauded for one of the most equitable ways of funding education in the country. And so if we don't stay with it, I will go off on the barricades because we fought this fight. I was on the board in the 90s and knew very well that we weren't funding education equitably. And we fought and tried everything we could until finally this came through. This study was done. We spent money from the legislature, and then they turned around when they saw how it looked. Because when Newski, as poor as they are, were getting paid 30% less than they should have been. I mean, we were only at 18% less than we should have been getting. The whole thing is awful, but we need to keep the weighting study.
So I've seen Earhart's hand, I'm seeing Catherine's hand, and I also want to keep us on track.
1 minute each.
Okay.
Do my best.
I'm confused. Are we in announcements or
We are,
have we done?
yeah. Good question. We tagged Gary onto announcements, and then because we were talking about pupil waiting, which
I
a
got
lot
it.
of us
Sorry.
get really hot about, including me, we kind of moved into speak out territory. So maybe that is a good segue to our speak out. Does that feel good for folks? Earhart, did you have an opinion or an announcement or a... What a surprise. Well, grab a microphone and move us on into speak out and share them both.
Well, I just wanted to speak to Gary and Kathy's comments. For one thing, I just want to make sure folks don't have the misimpression that the Brigham decision is to blame for the complexity of our school education funding system, which sometimes people have that takeaway. Brigham, as Gary explained, creates equity between so-called poor towns and the wealthy towns. And it is also really dangerous to go back to the foundation formula. When Peter and I were on the city council many years ago, and I think this was even before Sharon got on, the foundation formula was the formula that was being used around the state. And we fought against it really hard. It's an incredibly inequitable system, and we should all go to the barricades to fight against the return of the foundation formula, and certainly should go to the barricades to found for the weighting formula that Kathy spoke to. My announcement on a matter of personal privilege, I just want to let folks know one of my bands is putting on a wonderful night of music Friday night, Friday the 13th at Arts Riot. We're going to exorcise the evil spirits of Friday the 13th. It's a Brazil night, the headliner, including our samba band, Samba Tucada, is the Will Patton Ensemble. If you've ever heard them play at Lunigs during Jazz Festival, they're wonderful. They're up first. We have a small combo that's we just formed over the last couple of weeks for this, and then also Samba Tucada. We have a dance instruction as well. So it's on Arts Riot's website, or you can ask me for more information if you're interested.
Thank you. So does anybody else have something they want to share? My goal is to get us to city council announcements by 7:10. So we get a full 20 minutes with Carter. Does that sound good to folks? So we've got about 8 more minutes for Speak Out. And I saw Richard and then Sharon, and then you.
Many of you know, the typically improbable event of last Tuesday, I was hit by cars, sent flying, within 5 minutes of each other. One on a pedestrian crossing and one on the sidewalk. There's no lasting damage, bruises and abrasions, but they've all healed. I didn't report them because I think police have got more important things to do, but I think the city council has got something much more important to do, and that is let's get rid of this speeding and bad traffic behavior with impunity in this city. We went to from the NPA, we went to police commission in 2017, and Chief Del Pozo at the time said that it's his policy not to have traffic enforcement except in the most egregious situation, which probably means retrospective, because he brought up as bad interaction for the public with the police. Didn't make any sense, but nothing much you can do about it. So that is the policy in the police department. And to quantify it, police veteran on the force told me 2 years ago that in 21, the Burlington police made $50,000 in the whole year in fines for traffic infractions, and made 1.25 million, 1.2 actually, in parking enforcement. And I really question whether that relic from the Weinberger administration should be carried forward. Those our city councillors and reps, police commission have known all of this information and done nothing. That's every city councillor since Sharon, since she left. So we've diminished in terms of police. We've also diminished in terms of safety for the entire city and people coming into the city. That's my speak out.
Thanks, Richard. I'm so sorry to hear that happened to you, and we're so glad you're okay. Thanks for letting us know. Did you have a response?
I just had a quick
follow-on question. First, I want to thank you for the number of kids you help cross safely every day. You're my kids' crossing guard, and I wanted to know if it happened near the schools.
Outside Momo's.
Okay, yeah.
North Street, just 20 yards from the entrance to Highgrove Court.
I'm so glad you're okay.
Going east on
Horrible.
North Street and crossing the westbound traffic, and without any concern as to what might be walking up the sidewalk. So
He drove on the sidewalk?
he's going into his driveway,
Oh.
and neither of them hit me hard enough to cause any damage. So
Oh, I'm so glad you're okay.
I'm not necessarily blaming the drivers, the motorists. I'm blaming the culture in the city, which seems to be perpetuated. And talking about the Winooski Bridge, there's there's nothing in any of the open house this evening that addresses safety other than to encourage people to go more slowly. And as far as I know, the police have not been involved in enforcing any or in putting in place any impediment to speeding on the Burlington side of the bridge.
So I want to speak to that because I was on the city council and what generated the response from police was a report that came out showing that traffic stops had an inherent bias toward the people of color. That was something that was reported. It was reported in Burlington and throughout the state. So to address that, this is illogical, but to address that, they decided not to do traffic stops anymore because then you don't bring that bias. Rather than figuring out how to keep us safe and catch violators, we stopped doing it. And that has continued and it drove me crazy and it still drives me crazy today. I totally agree with Richard. I think all of us know, I live on East Avenue, as I stated, people fly down that street, even with the serpentine, whatever, traffic calming. They think it's wonderful. It's like a racetrack. And so I guess my point is for the counselor that's here and for people that are listening, I really wish there was someone from the police because I'm sure they'd want their side stated, but that's really part of the problem that we're dealing with in this city. Not staffing is one, but then this policy because of a problem that was identified. Having stated that, I have two quick things, and you know me, sorry. I was listening to the public radio and I already talked to you about this, but with GMP reducing the number of routes for public transportation, one of the questions arose was how much does Burlington put in to fund Green Mountain Transit? And it's $2 million. This is what I heard. I haven't fact checked it, but this is what I heard on the radio. Then the question came, how much does the state put in to fund Green Mountain Transit? I was shocked. $2.6 million. So if we're serious about environmental impact, if we're serious about making this state more livable and attracting more people and having people not rely on their cars, I'm sorry, people, I never had great balance and I'm not going to be a bicyclist. I can walk, thank God still, but I need public transportation. And so it needs to be funded starting at the top by the state. So that was my little soapbox. And I guess I'll stop there since you want to spend. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Karen.
Can I respond to something that Richard just said?
Sure.
And what Sharon was saying. So yeah, I was listening to what you were saying, and I remember when Del Pozo was here and that whole conversation started. But I want to be careful here because I think it's partially conflated. Because I think what we were looking for was we were looking for non-moving traffic violations that we would limit those. Because I remember my wife was on the police commission at the time, and I think I came on shortly thereafter. And yes, there were a lot of there's a lot of discretion that goes into traffic stops, and of course there's bias. There's racially disparate outcomes in these traffic stops. We've been fighting that for decades. But I don't believe that decision was saying that there was this mandate to stop all traffic violators. I mean, to stop enforcing all traffic violations. Well, that's what I heard. What I was getting at though is that it's not even true on that account, because I've been stopped since then, several times for non-traffic violations. I think I think I started off wrong. I'm really sorry you got hit. I read that on Front Porch Forum as well, and I meant to reach out to you even before this. So I'm really sorry about that. Amongst other things, that there's huge problems with that. The only point I really was chiming in here with is I just wanted to create some clarity because, if your headlights out, for example, it's not a really good reason to stop somebody. But if you're flying down the road doing 80 miles an hour in a 20,
Whether it's day or night.
yeah. Well, so I think my point is made. I just wanted to just clarify that.
Appreciate it. And I'm
The evidence, substantial though it is in the disparity between the fines exacted for traffic infractions and that for parking. That's the point. I don't think anyone here has ever been injured by a parked car. And that's the point that is
Open the door on.
sent.
Yeah, I think I was injured by a park car. Yeah, I get your point, though.
I'm just taking note of this. It feels like there's a lot to unpack here and that maybe we could think about a future agenda item where we really look at some of these issues together in a holistic way. I want to give you a chance to just speak really quickly and then get things over to
This
Carter.
is a very small issue, totally changing the subject. I'm really concerned and upset, probably the rest of you are too, about all the world wars going on in the world. And I have this thought that maybe the Vermont legislature could somehow, with our help, pass a bill, a law, a resolution, I don't know. Because last year there was that petition that went to President Biden that Troy signed, all of our representatives signed it. There were 68 different representatives, I think. So, because if you look at the fact that more than half of our tax money goes to fund war, and all of these problems that we have here are due to not enough money, and they're just, the killing keeps going on every day in Gaza, and it's just I'm trying to figure out what we can do. And so the question is, could the legislature in Vermont, with the help of the citizens, pass some kind of a thing that would have more teeth than just writing petitions?
So Troy, maybe when we get to don't do it now, but maybe when we get to legislative update, you can share any thoughts you have on that. Does that sound good? Carter, are you ready to give us some council updates? You want to come up here just so you be camera ready? And how much time?
I can try to speed through it like 15-20 minutes.
Yeah. See, are you okay just starting 5-10 minutes later since we're missing some senators?
Brian is planning to come.
Brian won't come. Bill and Martine are not going to join us.
Okay, well, Richard, I mean, just first, I'm sorry to hear it. But switching gears a little bit. So I have a couple updates. I typed them out this time, so I was hopefully a little more efficient because there's a bunch to get through. And I also want to leave questions or time for questions as well. So as folks know, I'm on the CDNR committee. So I just wanted to outline specifically what I feel like all the other NPA updates have been more general, like what is the council doing? But I want to outline it.
Say what CDNR stands for, just for any new folks who.
No, yeah, very, very fair. The City Council Committee, the Community Development and Neighborhood Revitalization Committee of the City Council. So I just wanted to dive in. We haven't been super active so far, although we have started a few items, and there's really 3 larger pieces of work that I'm going to be focused on in the near term and the next 6 to 12, maybe closer to 6 months, that I want to highlight. So first, Jonathan knows this, many folks in this room know this. Our NPA, along with others, I believe as well, Ward 5 at least as well, have wanted to clarify, we sent a resolution from this body to the city council, trying to clarify the relationships between the NPA and the city. And so that's happening. It's slow going, but it's happening. And we just had a good meeting the other day. So I don't think it's, it's not groundbreaking stuff, but I think it's a very important step in terms of level setting what the relationship is, sort of the status of MPAs, and to get a sense from stakeholders so that both we know as a city, MPAs understand, city staff understand what folks' sort of collective vision for the role of MPAs in the city is moving forward. And there's some value stuff there of, the city's view and the MPA's view of its role, but also hopefully some like more pragmatic sort of next steps for CEDO to follow up on. The second piece, I'm working, so not introduced yet, but is probably in the January meeting of CDNR, and I believe that's the 20-somethingth of January. I'm working with the city attorney's office right now to think through ways that we can strengthen the council's conflict of interest rules without having to do a charter change. Right now, essentially, conflict of interests, we're policing ourselves as counselors. So it's kind of like the banks regulating the financial industry. And so while I sort of trust the intentions of myself and most of my colleagues most of the time, we are not the best people to tell ourselves, we're not best positioned to make those decisions, and certainly not objective. So waiting for some feedback from the city attorney's office, but I'm believe there's a path and a mechanism we can do without a charter, which would allow us to require financial disclosure forms at the start of each city councilor's term. Again, most of the information is already that we're going to be allowed to legally do without a charter. Will be sort of pulling public information from different spots that's existing. And there's also some question that we're going to have to figure out around, if you're a lawyer on the council, disclosing who you're working for might present a conflict on a sort of professional ethic perspective. So we're going to have to figure out some workarounds in some specific situations, but that is coming down the line in the next month or two. And then the third thing, and maybe I'm most excited about, and maybe the biggest picture is, not that the other two aren't important, I'm going to be introducing a draft. It's actually next week, December 18th, at the next CDNR meeting, of a resolution, and it's probably going to take a few meetings to actually show up to the council. But I'm going to ask city officials to present a report to the committee. Still need to determine the timeline, but to investigate pathways and present different pathways that the city can pursue to invest an additional $1 million into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So for context, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, we allocated just over $2 million for FY25 to private and public nonprofit housing developers and folks who, for maintenance as well as of existing affordable housing. The resolution specifically will be worded in a way that we're asking for options that, in terms of the funding itself, it must be revenue neutral on property taxpayers, is one. And two, any revenue generated, if it is not revenue neutral, must be raised in a progressive manner. So meaning on the backs of folks who are making the most in our community, the wealthiest residents and businesses. And I was debating, but I did put a cutout to allow for taxes that would be generated. There's a reasonable way that we could show the revenue would be generated from tourists specifically, so that we're really sort of protecting residential property taxpayers and small businesses in our city. The resolution will also ask city staff to present options that sort of clarify or sort of delineate between this is what we could do with the existing powers we have as a city, and this is what we could do if the state granted us X, Y, or Z pathways. Because a lot of this, we just don't have the authority to progressively tax, but I want to figure out what those are, because we're going to have to make a bunch of judgment calls over the next couple of years of what our priorities are in terms of our city's general fund, because we can't do everything on a local level alone. And the number one thing I heard on the doors in terms of what should be a priority of funding within that discussion was capital projects, public safety, housing. So I'm hoping that this is the start of a process to make sure that we're putting housing squarely on the table as we're having these conversations. The last thing I would say is, well, and I guess to just talk about the merits on the housing piece a little bit, or my thinking behind it, I got involved in local issues in 2018 is when I really started like paying attention, working on campaigns, watching city council meetings. And every candidate, every elected official has said housing is the number one priority. And every single year it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And we've said, the debate was for a while, we just need to build more housing. Well, we built more housing in our history over the last decade since, 70s or 80s in terms of number of units per year being built. While it is true we need to build more housing, we have a mechanism that was developed back in the 80s, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, that allows the city to invest directly into affordable housing, the development and maintenance of affordable housing. And we also have a very cost-effective, efficient, and effective network of nonprofit partners. For example, Champlain Housing Trust, that not only are they effective here, and we have a lot of sort of local specific examples over the last few decades to show their effectiveness, which I plan to do. They've also been used around the world, their models, in terms of the creation of affordable rentals and home ownership opportunities, the maintenance of affordable housing. They are sort of the world standard, quite literally. And so when we talk about trying to slow gentrification, slow the absurdity that is our housing market, and folks profiting off of it rather than us focused on housing folks in an efficient way. So anyway, so we know that, that the question really isn't like, how do we do this? The question is, where does the money come from? I cannot control what the state decides to do. It's my personal opinion that the state, the governor, state legislatures, House and Senate, not Troy, our wonderful state representative, or Selena, but it have not been overly serious. And the solutions that have been put forward are nowhere close to the scale of the problem and haven't been for a long time. And certainly the federal government, certainly not in the next 4 years, is going to not prioritize investments in affordable housing in the near term. So the option cannot be, well, that's a hard reality, so we are going to just keep wading through it. I think we've got to take some more aggressive steps at the local level. It's not a silver bullet. And sometimes in government, it's like bureaucratic inefficiency, or how do you deliver services, or how do you do something? In this case, I really do think it's a matter of funding. So that's all I got. I'll stop ranting there. I do want to take questions. One other thing before I do, not to step on Troy's state updates, but I do just want to highlight, because of Gary's update, the solution to our property tax, my humble opinion, at the state level, our property tax issue, because it is a huge issue, is not to have a sort of like Hunger Game of folks in the budget of different social services that we provide, essential for everyday people, or, well, why don't we, why don't we cut, our property taxes are too high, so why don't we go cut school lunches for kids who can't afford it? That is the opposite of the direction we should be going. So what's the alternative? The alternative, and, folks can go online, fairsharevt.org. There is already a bill in the House, I believe, that focuses on a surcharge for folks earning very high income. So it'd be a 3%, just as an example, and there's many other ways we can tax the rich. I'm happy to talk about them in the future with folks. But this particular approach would put a 3% personal income tax surcharge on folks making over $500,000 of income a year, which is quite a bit. That would generate alone just that 3%, and it's just a marginal tax rate, so it's only affecting folks' income once they hit that 5% or $500,000 threshold. That alone would generate over $74 million right? So it is not a question of not having the resources. It is not a question of allowing our kids to go hungry while they're in school. It is a question of whether or not quite frankly, House leadership, Senate leadership, and the governor, whether they have the wherewithal to stand up to many of their donors and many of the folks that fund their campaigns and political parties. So that's my take, my humble take. I just don't want to I couldn't let that conversation happen without making that point, because the entire conversation has devolved in what are we going to cut, instead of how are we going to raise the revenue in a way that makes sense. So I'll turn it over to questions from there.
So many questions. Oh my gosh. How about Cheryl Green? I haven't heard from you yet.
Thanks. So Carter, first of all, I just want to say so much appreciation for all that you're doing. And I really appreciate this commitment that the council and the administration has made to build that bridge between the state and the city. And it's showing up in every time that you report out. I really am thinking a lot about that. I also just really want to acknowledge that your life is suddenly different. Your geographic buddy on the council is not there any longer. And so that means you've had a long winter. And if there's anything that we all can do, I have no idea exactly what that would be. But please know that we're here for you and really appreciating the things that should do. Yeah. And also just a quick announcement in terms of bridges again. I was really thinking about you, Sam, as Gary was reporting out, and thinking how refreshing it would be to, alongside Gary's report, have Sam be able to make a few remarks about life in the high school. And however you feel like you can do that professionally or would feel comfortable doing that, it feels to me like that would be a great opportunity for us.
Any hands, please. Sorry, it's you.
I am just wondering, Carter, if you know what's happening with the relationship with the city and UVM around student enrollment. I think that is a factor also in housing. And, I'm just struck by how you said in the last, 10 years or 20 years, we've had a big increase in the amount of housing units built. And also during that time, UVM's enrollment has increased a couple of thousand students. And it's not just housing, but it's also the wear and tear, in our community, traffic, et cetera. So I'm just wondering about that.
Just to answer quickly, I think you're totally right. I got my first Councilor's Corner in the New North Ave News coming out tomorrow. And Troy has a UVM housing bill. I'll let Troy speak to it. But Troy has been working incredibly hard on getting the state legislature to take some action to hold UVM accountable. We've had many conversations since I started running for office and then getting elected. The building is not very open to it, but it needs to happen. And certainly at a minimum, which is not the case now, our entire Burlington delegation needs to view that as a priority. And that's not the case. But you're right. The reason we have a 1% vacancy rate in the face of building more housing year over year than we ever have, not the only reason, but in large part is because UVM doesn't house its students. Other colleges within our city, Champlain, houses its undergraduate students all 4 years. So I was talking to a former state senator, and I'll keep them anonymous because I don't know if I'm supposed to share it or not, but they said, if I could wave a wand and pick one thing to have an impact on the housing market in Burlington, it would be for UVM to house all four students all 4 years, which makes a lot of sense because it's going to drastically open the vacancy rate, and within our sort of private housing market, put renters in a better position.
I think I'm also, if I can just follow up, I don't think it's just that UVM needs to build housing for its students. I also think enrollment needs to be capped because it's not just housing that gets impacted by the enrollment. So anyway, that, yeah. Somebody else wants.
Yes, but you, do you mind handing me that? Thank you. Oh.
Hi, thanks. Thanks, Carter, for your all that you're doing. And I just wondered what currently the city council's doing about public safety. What are some of the initiatives? What are you guys working on currently?
Yeah, that is a great question. I have a bunch and I'm trying to figure out the best way to do it. I mean, I guess the thing that's been in the news is really around, there's just an article in 7 Days talking about, and actually this conversation around traffic enforcement had me thinking about something I ought to think more about. But there's a really large morale problem in the Burlington Police Department. I don't think it's simply because of policy decisions made by past city councils. That might be part of it. I have a hope that as we find new leadership for BPD, that, you know, I have the assumption that part of the process of finding the right person to lead that department is going to be someone who can turn that around. I mean, I think part of that is like basic labor practices. We're burning these folks out because we don't have enough of them. There is a problem. I do think it's a legitimate problem to only send officers consistently because we have low staffing levels. One, we need them to go to sort of the intense, you know, sort of more intense calls that sort of their skill set is applicable to. But to just do that over and over and over and over is understandably draining on any human being. So we need to figure out a way. I think a big piece of it is sort of how do we take care of folks' mental health in the department? How do we build a culture of that that's quite different? And I do think there's some culture shift that needs to happen that hasn't happened. So that would be there's a lot of other things going on, and I think the best, instead of trying to do it off the top of my head and probably miss a lot of stuff, I can send the mayor did a community safety update, which was sort of all encompassing, or the best sort of thing that I've seen that's most encompassing. So I can send that along. I'm happy to like take down an email too, just because I think that's probably going to do justice to like sort of getting a level set on what's happening across city departments better than I can do now.
I think it just remains one of the key issues, and so.
Sorry. So very regular updates as to what is going on with regard to vacant buildings, to loitering, to open air drug use. All of it is really concerning to lots of people throughout the city and certainly in our neighborhoods. And so the more regular updates from city council, from the mayor, are really, really important.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally a fair point. And I don't want to get off at a tangent on structural issues, but, the mayor's has done a lot of, get on the mayor's email list. If you're not, check out the mayor's updates on the city website, because I do find them really helpful. I wish they were much more regular, and our mayor has 2 staff people to run 18 department heads, $107 million budget. So I do think that there's always this sort of tension of like electeds not really having the resources to get the information out. Sometimes it's hard to do. I'm just a nerd, so I try to be really good about it. But yeah, like we don't have staff on the council, like, so it poses real challenges.
We have time for probably 2 to 3 more questions before turning things over to Brian, who I see online, and Troy. And I have Tom, Jonathan, and Sharon, who all want to ask a question. Am I missing anybody? Tom.
Yeah. Carter, thanks for coming. And oh yeah. Carter, thanks for coming. Can you come back to our next meeting and tell us what fair share means? I hear it bandied about a lot. It's like people aren't paying their fair share. And I don't know what that means. When I look at my property tax bill, my impression is that while the school component is somewhat progressive, the city part is not. All right. And so I don't think we can discuss it now, but it would really be helpful, at least to me, if you come back and talk about what you think fair share is next time you're here.
And maybe Troy and Brian can tell us a little about the state level Fair Share Coalition too, as part of their updates, if you're willing.
Thanks, Carter, for all this. And if I can ask a question about each of the two CDNR things that I don't know anything about. First, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I think this is really, really important. I think it's a wonderful idea. What I don't know is like what fraction of the units in the city of Burlington are already marked affordable and what fraction should be. Because I just don't have a good idea of where we are, how bad it is, how, what really the right answer is. My feeling is that to some extent, you need to have fair market properties, but the fair market properties have to be stabilized somehow. That's where the conversation about the university comes in my mind. So how much affordable housing is there? How much affordable housing should there be? That's the first question. The second question has to do with the conflict of interest, which I think is really important. You look at Clarence Thomas and you say, my God. And so it's blatant, it's obvious there's a problem. Is it blatant and obvious that there's a problem in city council? I think it's an important question because of the work that it may take. I also kind of wonder about you're using attorneys as an example, and this is out of my ignorance, but my sense is that law firms tend to be real sticklers about conflict of interest, more sticklers about it than almost any other profession. So you can go around and look at the professions of all the people on the city council, and the ones that are more likely to recuse themselves, I think, are the lawyers, because they'll lose their jobs if they mess something up. It's the other side. So if you could just kind of talk a little bit about this, and then I'll be happy. Thanks.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, just to your second question first, mentioning lawyers only in the sense that they can't always share who their clients are. And so if we're asking for disclosure, how do we do that in a way that sort of respects professional ethic at the same time of wanting to get information public? And I don't know the answer to that. And I think that's what we got to figure out. The affordable housing piece. So at risk of, and Erhard could tell me this, but I think it's over between 20 and 25% of our rental housing is considered permanently affordable. It's determined as a percentage of area median income, I want to say. And just to give a picture of where we are, 60% plus of our residents rent, they don't own their home, and 31% of renters pay more than half of their income to rent alone. So to me and there's, another sort of large chunk that pays over a third. So to me, the vast majority of folks do not make nearly enough to what would be considered a living wage for a household in Burlington, and costs are going up and wages haven't followed. So we can't, I don't know, I said this on the morning drive show when I did the interview a couple of months ago or whenever it was, and someone called in and was like, how dare you? But people are getting price gouged, it's not a matter of, we have a few landlords who this is their retirement investment and they have a unit. It's a matter of huge swaths of rentals being owned by a smaller and smaller number of folks. So I think that's the place we find ourselves in. I don't know the exact right balance, right? I don't know. I couldn't give you a number that I'd feel like I'm 100% sure that's the right number. But we're so far in one direction is my perception currently. If that's,
let's go to Sharon for her question because we don't want to keep Brian and Troy waiting too much. Okay, quick comment.
One of the things you may want to compare is the percentage of the population that's on Medicaid versus the percentage of affordable housing. Because that's some measure of where we are money-wise on a per family basis.
And CEDO does a good annual report for around some of their federal funding around a lot of these questions and dynamics. So that could be a good source of information too. Sharon, bring us home and then we're gonna.
Right. Well, HUD provides a lot of what you're talking about, and the affordability that we have in is usually imposed by inclusionary zoning, which requires 15% of development of 10 units or more. But that's not meeting the need. That's just the requirement. And then, as you pointed out, Carter, oftentimes people don't build 10 units or more because they don't have the funds to subsidize or to make the units affordable. So you're absolutely right there. My comment was regarding safety that was just asked about, and I just wanted you to hopefully I don't want to put you on the spot, but the council supported getting additional enforcement down on Church Street during the holiday season. And I read that although that has made a difference, I read some places where people still saw activities. And I guess my point is, when we're talking about safety, it's more than enforcement. It has to do with the underlying inherent problems that are creating people to be in a situation of homeless or houselessness, or turning to medication, to self-medicate or addiction. And so I think when you talk about safety, if you're going to give a more global response, I think the city council and the administration is trying to deal with all of those components. And if you could try to bring that together, not tonight, I think there's a lot that the community would like brought together, and it's been so piecemealed because that's the only way you can approach it. But somebody needs to bring it together so people can understand how the city is globally trying to address safety concerns in all areas regarding pedestrian safety and safety for individuals wanting to go downtown or who work downtown, et cetera. Thank you.
Yeah, and just one quick thing. I won't try to list off, but so the mayor now has and I'm going to blank on the name, but a senior advisor to the mayor specifically to coordinate public safety measures across city departments. So that's we're the role has been sort of what you're describing has been identified and is being pursued.
Do you maybe ask if that you know how you've added things to the agenda? I'm sorry, the agenda is going to be forever now, but I think if that person could report on a meeting basis, every meeting, about either a specific item or addressing safety, that would be really, really helpful. Thank you.
It's a good idea. And just very quickly, because I want to give the mayor's office their due. There are town halls that have started. I know folks have attended.
Yes.
Will continue every 2 months indefinitely as long as the mayor is the mayor.
I'm coming right up on drugs.
Yes. Yeah. And so is sort of covering, because it is such a dense topic and it touches in literally every city department that we have in a variety of ways. It's cops and the culture of BPD, it's affordable housing, it's drug abuse, it's across the board, all these different factors, preventative and reactive. So I would encourage folks to participate in there, because I know that I won't speak for the mayor. One thing I know about the mayor is that there's a genuine interest in community engagement and hearing feedback and learning from folks. And so these are not events to say we did events. The feedback is actively getting incorporated into the city's approach. So I'd encourage participation there. yeah, that's a good idea in terms of the council updates, because we do have technically a public safety update portion dedicated. But like the climate reporting, unless you have somebody sort of always there from city staff following up and ready to present something, it isn't the most useful. That's a good idea.
Great. Thank you so much, Carter. And this is your first time in person with us since your new arrival at home. So officially, congratulations. Yeah. Thanks for making time on an evening. I know it's challenging. All right, Brian and Troy, would you like to join us here? And we have regrets sent from our senators, Philip Baruth and Senator Gulick, who ended up not being able to make it, but she could never make it. We had some on the agenda who realized they ended up with some conflicts, but thank you to our state reps. All the more reason to thank our state reps for being here. And we have got about 45 minutes with you. So I'll let you decide how you want to organize your updates, and just please leave plenty of time for questions and conversation.
How about we're going to model the kind of practices we want to see in the legislature. Let's talk in front of everyone about this instead of secretly. How about like I set a timer for myself for 3 minutes so I don't go off and then you go, and then we just turn directly to questions. Yeah. Okay, because I think in 3 minutes.
I think you can go longer than 3 minutes.
Well,
I think you could go longer than 3 minutes too.
I get excited and overly detailed. I am setting a timer though, because my sense of time is worse than ever due to the level of, I might as well just jump right in, trauma I'm experiencing as a healthcare worker in the face of what I would call a humanitarian disaster. We're seeing a convergence of a housing crisis and what I'm calling a polysubstance pandemic. I have never, and I grew up in New Jersey in an area where there was a lot of drugs. I've never seen anything like this. I'm gonna cry if I think about it too much, like the level of suffering. 5 people have died at this point, 3 from exposure and 2 from infections. I'm seeing people's legs and arms disappear. I'm seeing police brutality. I'm seeing our neighbors peeing on unhoused people, pouring maple syrup on them. But I'm also seeing resilience. I'm seeing people who, when they feel heard, like puff up and like speak out more. I'm having people ask me if I would drive them to rehab if they decide to go, which is really sweet. And I'm seeing neighbors. I'm hearing stories too of neighbors who are mystery neighbors coming out and being angels and helping people. So I just want to acknowledge that in the face of state violence against our most vulnerable and a failure of our state to take care of the people, that the people are taking care of each other. And I want to acknowledge it. So, but that being said, I'm going to pivot from that because that's kind of the context we're in. Sorry, I burped. I just ate all this Indian food because I had therapy and meetings nonstop and then got here. So forgive me. So I'm known for introducing a lot of bills, and in this current milieu, I'm concerned that if there's too many bills, I'm going to be labeled as like wasting government resources on ideas that go nowhere, although a lot of them have passed in some form or another. So I'm trying to consolidate it to 8 bills. Okay, so I'm going to just tell you the topics and how they connect together. The first one, I should set my timer. See, this is. I'm going to set it for 3 minutes now, though. At least I'm self-aware enough to do it, because most politicians will talk to you like get the hook, like Showtime at the Apollo, you know. I don't know if you know that show. So the first one is a housing bill, because obviously, like if we were meeting the need for housing, we would not be seeing what we're seeing. It's like a fundamental, pivotal piece of the problem. It's a social determinant of health that's impacting. It's also a social determinant of crime and violence. So having a lack of housing is going to make health outcomes decline. It's going to make violence increase, and it's going to make crime increase. And there's public health research proving this. So we need to focus on providing housing for all. So there is a housing omnibus bill I'm working on that creates an income tax surcharge for 5 years on the top 1.5% of income earners. So I'm sorry if this affects you, but it would be anything you make over $500,000 a year. It would be an additional 1.5% taken, but that should net $50 million more a year for the next 5 years. And I propose that 33% of that go to the Land Access and Opportunity Board to invest in owner-occupied housing in I have many different forms. I don't want to get too much into the details yet, but I could come back to it if you want to know. 33% would go to the Agency of Human Services to build public housing for vulnerable populations, starting with DCF kids age 18 to 26 who get thrown out. Most of the people on the street, you talk to them, were DCF kids. So that's a problem there. But this housing would be for all people 18 to 26, like they do in Finland, so that people have a place to have affordable public rent while they save up money for down payments or other expenses. But it also would include housing for elders, housing for people who are justice involved, housing for people exiting incarceration. There's a list. So out of the 50 million I propose we raise a year on this small surcharge, 16.5 would go to the Land Access and Opportunity Board. 16.5 would go to the Agency of Human Services. So you have private housing, privately owned, publicly owned. 33%, 16.5 million would go as a tax break to homestead rates. So anyone here who owns your own house and your taxes went up, that 16.5 million would go towards bringing those rates down for the next 5 years while we try to figure out a better way to finance education. So we don't have to cut school meals, so we don't have to cut benefits of teachers, while we figure it out. And 1% would go back to all the property owners. So landlords, commercial properties, and the homestead properties would all get a 1% break. So everyone gets 1%, homestead gets 33%, not 33% break, but 16.5 million applied. But you get the gist. See this is what happens. Like that's 3 minutes. So I'm not going to tell you everything. I'll just summarize that the housing bill raises revenue to give tax breaks to property owners and expand access to ownership collectively and individually of private property, builds more public assets to house people, and then in 5 years evaluates, do we want to keep this surcharge or do we not need it anymore? Because it has a sunset. So it only goes 5 years. And in that housing bill, it would give tenants the right of first refusal when buying housing. It would look at tax breaks for landlords who do that. It would look at tax incentives and penalties around rent. So coming back with a report on, could the state charge extra tax if rent exceeds a certain amount to deter people from doing that? And could there be an incentive if your rent is lower than market rate? Could you get an extra tax break? So it's not rent control, but it's creating rewards and penalties for keeping rent affordable. And there's a variety of solutions in that housing bill. So I'm going to stop there because I gave you a lot of detail on one thing, and this is the issue. Is I get excited and it gets detailed, but I can circle back to the other topics, which include universal health care, neurological rights, year-round agriculture, alternatives to incarceration. I just want to tell you the topics. I can't remember and I don't want to hold this up. I'll say them in a minute. So go ahead.
I should put them on my spreadsheet. They would have been right here.
I'm sorry. It's just more paperwork people are asking me to do. I'm drowning in paperwork.
I do want to set the scene just a little bit before I talk about some of the things that I've been thinking about. We are very early in kind of some unknown territory about what it's going to be like to be legislators in that building. One of the first things we're going to be navigating is a contested speaker race. We just had a meeting with Jill, our neighbor from 16, Chittenden 16. And there's Laura Sibilia from Dover is also vying to be speaker. So we're navigating right now. We're going to meet with Laura as a caucus, the four of us, on Saturday. So there's some things up in the air right now about what it's going to look like. We do know that the landscape in the building is very different from what it's been like for the past 2 years. And that's going to have an impact on, my hope is that it's going to be a positive impact on collaboration and getting policy moving that will pass. So we're hopeful about that. I want to speak to a few things that have already been brought up in the room. Somebody asked about, a resolution ending our investment in wartime activities. I'm more than happy to work with you to put a resolution together. I've got a resolution brewing already with Senator Vyhovsky and Pike Porter on convincing our federal delegation to change the mission of the F-35, or to at least advocate for a change. I think we can do something similar for asking our federal delegation to be a little more vocal on divesting from the multiple wars that are happening right now. I do have a bill that will try to seek again to impact UVM's impact on the housing market. I do tie UVM's enrollment to vacancy rates. One of the things that we have this year that we didn't have last time I introduced this bill is that the state auditor has, in the meantime, done a really outstanding study in which he points out there's no way getting around that UVM's impact on the housing market has been significant and remains the most impactful reason why our rental vacancy is so low. One of the things too I will mention is the long-term residents of this district are in alignment with the students in this district on this matter, because this impacts students in terrible ways. They're shoved into triples. My work as a conduct meeting facilitator on campus, I hear stories weekly about students who are saying, I'm drinking myself to sleep, I'm smoking myself to sleep because I've been shoved into this triple, and that's difficult. And then, at the very beginning of their sophomore year, they're signing leases for substandard housing in September. That's not going to start until June. So the students are very, very, very much on board with this proposed legislation as well. There is no appetite for it in the State House. It's going to take a lot of convincing of many people. UVM remains a sacred cow in that building, and they have a very, very strong and effective lobby. So I will be turning to all of you to maybe help push that legislation more. I have decided, news to Brian, I am going to put myself forward as a nominee for a legislative appointee to the Board of Trustees. I think it's important to. I think it's important that a student-centered voice is in that room, that a staff-centered voice is in that room, that a neighborhood-centered voice is in that room. There's going to be pushback. Speaking of conflict of interest, the university has already indicated to me that they're going to push hard against any nomination that that has my name on it. So I may be looking for some support on that one as well.
Well, I'm on the House Ethics panel if you want to talk about it.
Yeah, we can. Yeah. Some other things that I'm doing. We won't know for sure until January. It would surprise me very much if I don't get reappointed to the House Committee on Corrections and Institutions. I do have some prison reform legislation that I'm pushing through. One with a Republican colleague, realigning the medically assisted treatment program within the Department of Corrections to align better with the state hub and spokes model. Trying again to divest Vermont's use of private for-profit prisons, out-of-state prisons. Trying to divest our use of for-profit commissary and telecommunications. I'm going to introduce a bill that seeks to pay incarcerated labor at least the federal minimum wage. And expanding the Kids Apart program. The Kids Apart program is a wonderful program run by the Lund Center that keeps incarcerated women connected to their children. We are expanding that to a men's facility as well. That's going to take some money, but I think we can do it. There's a lot of energy that I think is going to support that. Academic freedom for K through 12. So a lot of legislation I've got brewing that predicts really significant pushback from the incoming federal legislation, especially on gender affirming care, abortion care, the ability for us to teach a broad curriculum without removing books that recognizes students' gender identity. So I've got a K through 12 sort of academic freedom bill. I'm doing some migrant justice stuff that hopefully requires legislative approval for the governor to enter into what are called 287G agreements. These are the agreements that the federal administration can require the state to do the work of ICE and Homeland Security and Border Patrol. Right now, the governor is the only one who has the ability to make those agreements. I think he needs legislative approval. And then I'm working with a group called the Vermont Queer Legal Professionals. I think that VTQLP. I've got about 11 bills that are securing more and more protections for our GLBTQ plus population. So a lot of collaborative bills that are currently being edited by committee. So those are going to start getting input soon. It's fun to be a legislator when you have these conversations. So I'm sitting there in the living room with Mary Ann, my wife, and she's like, why do we pay a fee to pay these utility bills online? I was like, that's a good question. And like, we can afford it, but it's like a $5 add-on fee or something like that for a utility.
Pay online?
Yeah, so I'm going to introduce a bill that prohibits municipalities from charging convenience fees for online payments of utilities.
These charge us to use paper, now
just a
they're
little
charging
something.
us to
Right,
use online.
exactly. I'm sorry, that's a lot. I will stay, we can do questions and I will stay here as long as anybody wants me to have these conversations.
I can't do that, but I will stay as long as I can. All right, I saw his hand first, honestly, Lisa, and then yours
That's
on
okay.
yours, but I don't have my glasses on.
Are we going to Erhard?
Well, I didn't see his hand first. I saw
We'll go
Tom's
to
hand
Tom,
first.
Erhard, Lisa.
I have a question about healthcare.
Yes, please, because I didn't get to talk about it, so I'd like to hear the question.
Yeah, the state was one of, I think, 6 or 8 states to get money for the AHEAD program. And are we doing a good job? Is it gonna go anywhere? And what do you think?
Well, at the end of the session, we had applied for it, and I believe they were considering us.
No, we got it.
We got it, but we have not met. The legislature hasn't met. So I haven't been given an update on where we're at in the AHEAD program. So I can't answer that without looking, like seeing if a report was given or if anything. So we haven't had any updates on that. So I can't answer it, to be honest, without doing some research first, which I'm happy to do, to see if we got some kind of report or memo, but I haven't seen anything, which makes me think we'll get it like January 15th, when the AHS comes into that. If I'm on healthcare again, which I expect to be, they would come in and like give us an update on it. I will say that everything that we know and like appreciate and maybe don't like about the healthcare system is up in the air at this time. That the entire system, at the whole way we know healthcare to be delivered, is in jeopardy because not to get distracted, but AHEAD's supposed to help with that. But the question is AHEAD going to continue? Because what we are hearing, we get emails, as legislators from, not from you so much. We get hundreds of emails from like out of state groups, and right-wing out of state think tanks send us emails and tell us what they want to do. And one of these think tanks, the man in charge got appointed by Trump to be in a high position around the budget. And he has been saying for a while, and he's bragging now in his emails, that the first thing Trump is going to do is called impoundment. And they're going to use rescissions and deferred payments to stop disability, Section 8, food stamps, Medicaid. Any federal funding is going to be frozen. And then they're going to try to push through Congress rescissions to add to like a budget adjustment, like Vermont does. Usually we adjust in Vermont. We fix the numbers a little bit like this. We don't slash things, but the Trump administration plans to slash funding for basically all the programs created in the New Deal and in the war on poverty, like during, JFK and Johnson. And so I share that because in that context, even if I knew exactly what was happening right now with AHEAD, it's all going to change on the day Trump comes into office, and no one really knows Is Congress gonna fight back? Is the Senate gonna have enough people to, we just don't know. But I can say what we do know is that presidents have become very crafty in pushing the limits of executive orders. And Biden did this, in my opinion, good ways to expand Medicaid, to end medical debt. He passed a landmark artificial intelligence executive order. And the Trump team has been studying that and has plans to use executive orders to the greatest degree possible too. So we're walking into an unprecedented situation where we have all three branches of government controlled by a party whose platform is to dismantle the social safety net. And my perception is like a lot, if not the majority of Americans are believing like there's some good that's going to come out of this. And so the way I'm seeing it is, and this might be a little weird, but is that there's only so much I can control that you can control. So right now I'm focused on like taking stock of like, what can we do locally? What can we do on the state level to immunize ourselves from the possible collapse of the federal government, or at the very least, drastic cutting of funding, because so much of our budget comes from out of state. So I don't know if that's helpful, but it kind of the landscape of healthcare is that
It's not helpful, but
what would be helpful?
All right, I could speak to the AHEAD program. I
Can I
got
hear
it.
from him though, what would be helpful first? Because I concerned if a constituent thinks
I'd like to know how, if there's sufficient transparency on how healthcare is doled out, who subsidizes who, because Medicaid and Medicare and commercial insurers all pay different rates, and different hospitals charge different rates for different types of things. And I thought what a head is supposed to do is basically put a price on for a given population, say, okay, hospital X, you'll take care of whatever they need for this amount of money. And if we don't have visibility into how those three groups I mentioned are paying, then how can you do that wraparound? And that wraparound is sort of a first step to getting towards single payer. All right, so there's a motivation here that where you could end up with something very good, but not if you're doing it blind.
So I appreciate you elaborating on like what specifically you wanted to know more about. The all payer model that we abandoned was doing that. It was like called like a per life amount that primary care offices would get, that providers, the payment reform that came through the all payer model and one care and all that. They were doing that, and a head is supposed to take that forward, that concept forward, and add in additional pieces. I think right now, if you're looking for the transparency, it would be in the public meetings of the Green Mountain Care Board, because they are the ones who are reviewing the budgets of hospitals. They're the ones who are reviewing the rates of insurance companies. And that's where it is right now in Vermont, that's where you would see in that public body the record that would answer those questions, and then the legislature gets updates. So I could also, if you could look yourself, or I could look for you, do our reports and pull out a few reports over the last year or two to show you what we've been shared, what has been shared with us about the process in setting rates and in regulating the containment of cost. So. Mark, did you want to say something about a head though? Because I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to.
So the Health Equity Advisory Commission, which I co-chair, we're in direct communication with the folks that are rolling out the program. And we're currently right now, I think it's the 15th of January that they're supposed to have a response back to CMS. So we're working through some of the details surrounding the advisory body that's going to be speaking into the AHEAD process and hammering out some of the other details. But the vast majority of the stuff that they're working on is not public right now.
Lisa was next. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I thought I saw her hand first.
Two things. One around housing, and well, that's the other around education funding. There was last year a proposal, or this year, for the session, that passed the House that would have raised $100 million a year for housing for the next 10 years. And behind that was a way of spending that money. And unfortunately, it died in the Senate. Yes, no, the plan that I'm talking about. What I would urge you to do, if you're looking at anything in housing, I know that Champlain Housing Trust and the other allied housing organizations that worked on that plan last year are coming up with a revision or a new version of that. So I would highly urge you guys to look at that as sort of the signature piece on what can really make a difference in terms of housing in the next in the coming biennium. And the other thing I wanted to just say was I was on a webinar with Public Assets Institute last week about their education proposal. They're focusing for next year just immediately on fiscal relief for low and moderate income, middle class folks, which have been hit the hardest with our education tax increases. And I would urge you to look at that. What they're basically doing is changing all the thresholds for the current income sensitivity program that really provides income sensitivity basically to 70% of Burlington residents and homeowners. That has those numbers, those thresholds have not been rejiggered in quite a while. And so they're focusing on the immediate need for tax relief. And then their next step is to look at a more income-based or a completely income-based program, through the discussions that will happen around long-term changes to education funding at the state assets. So just two recommendations: look at what comes from the housing partners led by Champlain Housing Trust and a number of others, and then look at public assets, property tax relief.
Lisa.
I had a question about resiliency planning for climate disasters. And wondering what legislation, what's happening in the State House with that, or what do you anticipate?
You want me to share what I know of the thing?
Yeah, nothing. I mean, it's so early that I don't know for sure, but
We passed the bill around watersheds and about evaluating the safety and functioning of dams and looking at the infrastructure around our waterways. So that there's study of that happening. So we're probably going to be looking at some decisions around this. We're also in the process of the regional planning commissions are exploring land use maps. So there should be soon public engagement around these land use maps and the designation of development areas. And Kate Logan is a member of was a member of the Energy and Environment Committee from Burlington, who was deep in this Act 250 reform work. So if people really want to get into the weeds, we can connect you with her. But essentially, the regional planning commissions are going to be working with municipalities and local communities to identify areas, tiers of development in town and village centers. And a lot of our town and village centers are around waterways because that's how humans traveled when this land was colonized and before. In fact, the inhabitants of this land have been using the waterways for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. But the way development occurred around these waterways is it encroached on them, it polluted them. And as I don't want to preach to this, but as climate change is worsening weather events, we're seeing worse floods. Like we had the 1927 flood, and then we've had multiple floods similar since. And the scientists are telling us to expect more floods, and actually a greater threat is landslides. And so as we are looking at this, was that just like a reaction, or because I'll stop and let you talk?
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. If you had some oh my God reaction, I get it,
No, I just said floods. I said tonight, possibly, for example.
Yeah, I can't even think about it because my basement. So I can't go to the back there now. When I finish work, I have to go down there and pump it and stuff. But that's nothing. Imagine your home falling off a cliff, or we had it happen here in Ward 1. That house is on the edge of a cliff. I mean, we're going to see more landslides. So as we look at land use maps for the next 100 years, we need to take into account climate change, and we need to think about restoring riparian areas and floodplains and being strategic about where we develop. And so in terms of resilience, just to directly tie it into your question, the residents of communities are going to have an opportunity in the next year, I believe, I have to look at the timeline to weigh in on land use maps. And then the legislature, there is a complex process that I won't get sucked into because then I'll talk for 10 minutes about it, but involving land use boards that review them. There's going to be opportunities for neighborhoods to organize. And I can guarantee you're going to see special interest groups organizing around this and trying. And I don't want to go to this rabbit hole right now, but there are people with a lot of money right now who are going to be gambling on trying to like influence these maps so that they can make a lot of money off the housing crisis. But as part of that process, Vermont's going to be looking at how do we develop in a resilient way. And so that's one piece. It's land use, it's infrastructure around our waterways and managing the waterways, it's infrastructure around housing and roads. And I think we can go further. One of the bills I'm introducing, there's a chance to like talk about it for a second, would look at creating hubs and spokes around the state for regional agricultural production, processing, storage, and distribution. But the idea being that we can't just expect humans to continue living the way we live in the face of this ecological disaster and having the food we have. So Vermont has the opportunity, if we start now, to look at, as we're building these new town centers, as we're building new developments, how do we embed agriculture for the residents into it so that there's gardens, there's greenhouses, there's community kitchens, there's freezers, there's places to give food out and for people to gather and eat built into the new infrastructure. That's what I'm saying is like, as we're doing all this planning, I think we need to embed agriculture in there. I also am suggesting in the housing bill that we look at local energy generation in any new development and local waste management. Like in the very design, when we're building housing, if we build housing that takes care of its own waste, makes its own energy, grows its own food, then if supply lines collapse, if we can't travel as much anymore because we don't have fuel, etc., at least people will have food. At least people will have, toilets that work and fresh water in their homes, and neighborhoods could be plugged into this. And so the idea that I'm proposing is that we identify areas where there's already hubs of agricultural production and focus there, or town and village centers might be like the Intervale would be a great hub, for example. And the spokes might be like Is Good Work, where there's garden walkways that come down from the Intervale and they end at like Callahan Park can have that kitchen be a community kitchen. Maybe, the Old North End in Battery Park over there could be a site. But the point is, if we build this kind of infrastructure during this housing boom, then we'll have housing, food, energy, etc., as the environment becomes increasingly unstable, and we have to be more self-sufficient. So I hope that answers kind of what we're doing and then what I think we need to do a little bit without, I just don't want to keep going and taking up too much space. So
Troy, you have anything to add there? Mark and then Sharon. Did you have a question?
Sharon, you want to go first? You look like you're getting ready to take off.
So as you're speaking, Earhart mentioned the affordability and housing and knows far more than I do. But that was one of the things that I didn't say at Speakout that really mattered to me. But as you're speaking, I've been around in Burlington for a long time. And hopefully I've absorbed some things, but I feel like I'm listening to Peter Clavell talk about sustainability. He was he was a visionary, saying that the Intervale, we needed to grow our own food. We couldn't depend on transportation to get food to us. We needed to anticipate meeting our own needs. It wasn't just for Burlington, because he took it around the world, as you know. So I think good ideas don't always get implemented, but they cycle back, thank God. And so I'm very pleased to hear some of what is being thought about and proposed. Some of it I think is utopia. I'm a realist, but I think that you have to start somewhere and you have to try to build it as best you can. I thought I heard Lisa ask, and maybe I threw this into the equation, that some of where people can live in the future will need to be zoned so that people don't build where they shouldn't. And so I thought that's what I heard her say, but maybe she didn't say that. So is in these maps, there's going to be designation. I mean, and we've tried to do that somewhat in little pieces here in Burlington about unstable slopes and not building on them to cause problems for the new development and the people at the bottom that might have that housing slide into them. So I'm just wondering, did you say that these maps would identify buildable areas and non-buildable?
That's the intent.
Okay.
I think what's going to happen though is it's a public process. So when we do it might seem like not related, but it is. When we do redistricting, we tell a board, come forward with maps, and what happens? The legislature just does what it wants. So like it's possible that there could be this huge process, and if enough money is dumped into it, that it will all get erased. And after seeing what happened in the last election, where big money from construction influenced the outcome of the election in Vermont, we have to organize communities to come out and really be present and watching what's happening and mindful of who's spending money and who's setting it up to get rich. Because if we allow developers to like sell property in flood zones, that's just throwing away the money of people who can't afford other housing.
Well, it erodes the insurance. I mean, we don't have all the money in the world to rebuild things that are going to be destroyed again. So we have to be smart. You see that along the beach lines, along the coast. And so I'm hoping that Vermont can come to terms with it. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mark.
So too.
You're very welcome. Good to see you.
We did pass, this is what I'm trying to remember, and this is not my wheelhouse when I'm in the building. So it's Act 121.
Yeah, that's the flood bill.
The flood, the Flood Safety Act. And there are some things in there. I don't know it as well as perhaps what Brian does.
It's essentially studying the waterways and looking at what dams are at risk of failing, which was happening during these floods. Like there were dams not functioning right. And there's some dams that shouldn't be there anymore. There's some areas like, I don't remember which one of you were saying like that should not be built. For example, in Montpelier, behind the Capitol Plaza, that parking lot, I think it should be dug out, turned into a park designed to handle like 30 feet.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, 30 feet. Well, I don't want to take up too much space either, but there's a way we could develop that to become a basin. And then if you want to build housing in Montpelier, it could be on the other side of a flood wall, where the basin is on this side can handle 50 feet of water if it ever happens, and without flooding any of the housing. But the only way we're going to get there is if the public really is involved, and it's not just people who are trying to make a quick profit, because that's not the quick profit. And my concern is the direction we've been going, and hopefully people wake up, is that apathy and a loss of hope and despair. A lot of people are disengaged, and it's creating an opportunity for people who know how the system works and have the money to work it. So I appreciate it coming up, and I know this is a very active NPA, so hopefully you all keep sharing your concerns. What did you want to say?
No, I was going to add Berry City has some plans in place too.
To do something like that. Yeah. So it's not like people are repeating the same mistakes. There's an effort and there's intent to do better. But my concern is if the better is not done right, it's just going to perpetuate disparities of the past, because that is often the case. But this is why we organize, why we have a Health Equity Advisory Commission that the Racial Justice Alliance created. We have the Land Access and Opportunity Board, which I now serve on, looking out for equity in the housing system. We have watchdogs. We have, we're going to have this public process around land use that actually could. The LAOB, the Land Access and Opportunity Board, is working with the regional planning commissions on this about how can we actually make that process a healing process too. It's not just about imagining what could be, but it's about healing the social fabric that's become so frayed since the pandemic. So you bring people together and you build community while you dream of the neighborhoods you want. I mean, that's really, it might sound utopian, but there have been examples in history where humans have done this.
We got about 5 minutes left.
So I'll just take a couple. So we'll come back offline on much of it, but number one, I know that the HRC is probably about nearly $900,000 short, and the Human Rights Commission. They're looking to expand, and this is obviously because of the proliferation of discriminatory reports in housing and I think public accommodations. We just had a press conference on this yesterday. So I don't think it's a surprise that the HRC is underfunded. So I was wondering if there was thoughts on that, and just generally all of those things that would go towards doubling down on protecting and supporting much of these I would say underserved or marginalized communities. Those specifically those communities that are going to be impacted by what we're seeing. I think what we're seeing is we're getting ready to experience a pretty significant onslaught, and it's been telegraphed, it's been communicated, it's coming. So I'm just wondering, what other types of conversations are happening amongst the legislators. We just lost, obviously, the supermajorities in both chambers. I think the Senate picked up 7 or 8, and House maybe 17 Republicans, right? So now that's going to be a tougher fight. Specifically, we're wanting to protect women, LGBTQIA, Black and brown folks, migrants. We know that those are the targets. Is there talk about revisiting the fair and impartial policing policy, for example, Title 20? Is there, are we talking about, what are we doing with equal protection, completing the constitutional amendment? I'd love to hear more about what the legislator is going to do specifically, and maybe not tonight, but maybe you guys can come back and tell us more. What are you going to do specifically to respond to what we know has already been forecasted and telegraphed that's going to impact these vulnerable communities?
Yeah.
Let me just add one last thing to that, and just also mention that there's significant oversight that would, I think, would be necessary, and we're talking about law enforcement oversight, yes, to augment this, and also maybe some independence. Maybe the Office of Racial Equity could be independent. Perhaps we could revisit the RDAP, the Racial Disparities in the Criminal and Juvenile Justice Advisory Panel, to give it some more authority and cause it to be more accountable here in its 7th year in operation.
I'm not going to have specific answers for you. I can tell you what my personal commitments are. I do know too that in addition to the budget shortfall for the Human Rights Commission, they've got a staffing shortfall. They can't take on the cases that this department was just talking about this on VPR this morning. They can't take all the cases that are being brought to them because they don't have the staff.
Yeah, let me just be clear on that. The reason why they're asking for the $800,000 to $900,000 is to staff out.
And to be frank, this administration balances the budget by keeping vacancies open. That is very much and a part of how this administration balances the budgets. And I share your worries and I share your concerns, and I'm incredibly worried with the federal legislation that's probably coming about the impact that that's going to have, especially on the migrant community here in Vermont, and the impact that that's going to have on ICE's and the Border Patrol's policing of and the asks. That this is precisely why I've got the bills that I do. I don't have specifics for you beyond that. I share your concerns. I share your worries. I worry that the political atmosphere in the State House is going to be overly cautious with regard to keeping everybody happy now that the supermajority is gone. I'm disappointed in the lack of bravery that the supermajority did not execute over the past 2 years. I think we had a very significant missed opportunities there. I'm worried about the kid gloves that people are going to put on in the name of collaboration and what that looks like. I can tell you I'm ready with floor speeches. I'm ready with challenging the language, the dog whistles that are going to show up. And I do anticipate that they're going to show up. I am certain that we are going to take a step backwards in the inability for the body in general to even have a concept of what equity means. It is going to be 101 time. And I think we have to find ways to bring that into the conversation as we're in the midst of a floor debate, when people are trying to say things without that are inherently racist, bigoted, homophobic. The way that that's going to creep into the conversation I can tell you I'm prepared for it. I'm anticipating it, and I intend to be as vocal as I possibly can be. With regard to policy solutions, my answer is going to be, I don't know right now. We have to kind of wait to, I know what the priorities are as they've been articulated to us by leadership. And that is the three big ones are housing, education, and healthcare. Our job, as some of the more vocal folks who do have a commitment to equity conversations, is to keep that involved with all of those discussions as they're happening. I feel more prepared about watching what's going on in the bigger picture. Going into it, this is my second term going in. And I already have ChatGPT helping me summarize bills and agendas that are going to be talked about each week. I know.
We'll have to talk about this later.
I'm gonna have Monday morning reports from me. I have an intern this year. The caucus has 2 interns this year. We haven't started talking about how we're going to utilize those interns, but my intention is to make sure that the 3 of them are committed to an equity lens and being the eyes and the ears in the committee rooms when we can't be there. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's
one thing I want to say is that through my work experience, because you asked about our legislators talking, I don't really talk to legislators much when we're not in session. I talk to like my neighbors and my clients, and the ones I am talking with are talking about who's going to be the speaker and doing all these deals and trades behind the scene, and I'm not part of that. So I don't know what they're talking about, but what I can tell you is what I do know is that discrimination, from my perception, is skyrocketing. And that when I went to the African American History Museum, it was so beautiful. It reminded me of this long struggle that we're part of. And it talked about how Black Lives Matter was the largest wave yet. And it's warned in that exhibit to expect a backlash. I did not expect it to be this hard.
This is it.
And the level of threats I'm getting personally, that the violence I'm seeing towards people of color, towards people with disabilities, towards immigrants, towards LGBTQ plus, it's really scary. And it, I don't know how I'm going to get through 2 more years of it without your support, without the community, because it is really isolating in that place, as you've worked in that building. But I just want to say that because there's a need to investigate the discrimination. And I'm not going to throw out names, although I really want to, of the landlord next door to me who contaminated my yard with lead paint, with painters who were living in illegal housing. This is in the news that Vermont Construction Company had. They didn't speak English, so they got a vendetta broke out between them and me because they didn't understand what I was mad about until I finally got them to, but then they still broke the law. The landlord still has yet to respond to this. And then I find out on top of that, so he's engaged in all these other practices. They're turning away homeless people who have housing vouchers from apartments once they find out they have a voucher, and none of the tenants will go to the CVO or anyone for help because they're all deathly afraid of being blacklisted for apartments. So it is out of control. And this is why we need the Human Rights Commission. I didn't mean to go off on a tangent. That your concerns are valid. I just don't know what to expect anymore, so.
15 seconds. I would just ask both of you if you could, with all of your heart, if you could just push back up against the leadership, because it doesn't sound like any of your priorities, your legislative priorities, have anything to do with anything that we're talking about.
That's because I didn't get a chance to talk about them in detail.
No, I mean the big 3 that you just named.
We'll talk, Mark.
15 seconds are over.
We'll talk outside.
I'm learning how to put the mic down.
We are, if we want to end on time.
Yeah.
Is there another burning question, or should we?
Can we come back in January, maybe? I don't know.
Every month. You're welcome every month.
Please. Maybe even between.
I just didn't think there was a time on the schedule.
There's time for our legislators.
Okay.
Every month. You may not see it on the agenda.
So I'll come at least on Zoom then.
But there won't be an hour every month.
Yeah, you're like.
You have to use that time. I'm gonna want one, maybe 2 issues that are your priorities for that month.
Sure, and it'll be on Zoom because I'll be in Montpelier, but I'm happy to show up and you could say, what are you talking about this week? And I can tell you. So
Yes. Housing, education, healthcare.
And I think, I just wanna say, I really heard you say, and I feel it too, there's only so much in the system we have that our legislators or our city council can do about these big issues. We need all of us, like I heard Brian say that, I feel it too, so.
Yeah.
Let us know when you want us to show up.
for.
I will, yeah.
Yes.